Hi, I'm Julia and welcome back to my booktube channel NB Library. Today is February 2nd and here in the US it's Black History Month. I've been really excited about filming this video. This is going to be a month-long reading vlog where I read as many Black history books as possible. Now, I've narrowed down the books by Black authors on my TBR to specifically books about Black US history. I have some historical romance set in England, but I want to be fair and say this is US Black History Month, so I'm focusing on US books. And I'm also trying to focus on historical books, so historical nonfiction, historical fiction, or contemporary books that deal with historical themes or flashback to historical points. So let me show you my TBR, and then I'll get started on reading and reviewing these books. So first, my physical TBR. Let's just go through them real quick here. History of Black Craft and 10 Objects. I'm actually already reading this one. It's a quick read, a quick little nonfiction book highlighting 10 objects with little biographies about them. Miracle at St. Anna by James McBride. This is one of the books that I own, and it got made into a movie, and yet for some reason my library didn't have a copy of the book. This is set in Italy during World War II and follows a group of Black US soldiers. Mississippi Solo, A River Quest by Eddie L. Harris. This is about a Black man who decides to canoe the entire length of the Mississippi. So it's like nature travel writing, so I'm excited about that. I just picked this up from the library. I'm super excited about it. The Starseekers by Nicole Glover. I just reviewed the previous book in this loosely connected series, The Improvisers, in my December wrap-up, and honestly, I had a lot of issues with it, but it was still fun and I rated it 3 stars, and I read a review of this book that listed like all of the issues that I had with The Improvisers seemed to be present in this book, and yet for some reason I'm really excited about reading it. I think one of the reasons is that it's based on the women highlighted in Hidden Figures. It's described as Hidden Figures meets Indiana Jones, and unfortunately that is my shit. Black Owned by Shar Adams. This is from the library, and it's about the history of Black-owned bookstores, which is a topic that I know virtually nothing about. Jax Freeman and the Phantom Shriek is a middle grade book by Kwame Mbalia. This is about a young man whose ancestor was a Coleman porter, it seems like, and the glare is intense here. And it's fantasy, but also goes into like the history of these porters. How the Word is Passed by Clint Smith. This is like a modern day classic. I have to read this month. I was really excited to get this from Half Price Books. This is about the Civil War, but it's getting into like the legacy of the Civil War and how it's still present, like physically, geographically in the South. I really like Clint Smith's poetry, so I'm hoping that I like his prose. And there's a book, I'll put it up on screen, I can't remember the exact name of it, that I read last year or the year before, it was the year before, that references this book, and it's about like legacy of monuments and like Confederate and white supremacist monuments in the South. And in that book, the narrator is going to various Civil War monuments because of reading How the Word is Passed, and he meets another Black family there who are also visiting that monument because they read this book. So it's kind of been on my radar since then, and I'm really excited to get to it. And then Nature Swagger is kind of like the Black Craft book, a series of like profiles. So it seems like it will also be more quick to get through. It looks big, but there's a lot of, photographs and stuff like that. And this is about Black people in the outdoors, which is something that's very important to me. Then the digital TBR, we've got The Great Mann by Kyle Davis, I think. I'll put it up on screen, which I own on my Kobo. And then I'm planning on listening to Unbound, which is a novel in verse set during the antebellum South, I believe. I mainly picked it up because it's read by Bonnie Turpin. She's kind of an auto-buy narrator for me. These Heathens by Mia Mackenzie, which is about I believe, queer Black woman getting an abortion in the South, or she's trying to get an abortion and her teacher is queer or something like that, but Mia Mackenzie is a lesbian author. I've actually wanted to read her for a while, but there's this one book of hers that I wanted to read that like wasn't at the library and I couldn't find any copies, so I kind of gave up. So I'm glad that she has a new release out that is more accessible. And then also hopefully coming in soon is the audiobook for The Davenports, which is a still historical, but more, I believe, lighthearted romance, and I think it's YA as well. There are some books that I've got on hold that came out recently or that come out this month that I'm really hoping come in soon. So that's The Keeper of Lost Children by Sadeka Johnson, which is another World War II book. They're my weakness, I'm sorry. About, I believe, tracking down the children of Black service members and white European women. So I think that's super interesting. The Seven Daughters of Dupree, I don't know a lot about, but it's a generational novel that just came out, or a family saga. And then Forgotten Souls is also a World War II book. Listen, I call myself out before anyone else can, but this is about tracking down Tuskegee Airmen who went missing in action during World War II by Cheryl Thompson, I think. Cheryl something. Again, I'll put it up so that you can see the proper name. And then there's others that I might read or check out, but this is the immediate TBR for this month and for this video. And again, I'm excited to get started. Like I said, I've already, let me move all of these. Already a good chunk of the way through Blackcraft, which I just started today. I just stumbled across this in a very organic way where the front page of my library will show you books that have been recently added to the library or books that have been recently reviewed, and this one popped up and I thought that's perfect for Black History Month. So it came in on hold recently, and now I'm going to let my previous self show you a little trip to the library where I picked up some of these library books. I'm here at the library and I've come to get some books for the vlog. So I'm hoping to get Black Swagger, which is not necessarily a history book or historical fiction, but it is about Black people in the outdoors, and so it's like a profile of 30 different people, and there's photographs. And then Jax Freeman and the Phantom Shriek, which is a middle grade book by Kwame Mbalia. And then Black Own, which is a new release that I think came out earlier 2026, that I also have the audiobook on hold for, but it's not going to come in time, I don't think. So I'm going to get that one, and I'll tell you a little bit more about each of those books after I find them. I'll just hold it. This is so inconvenient. All right, so you can see my hand. I got Black Owned, which is by Shar Adams. This is about the history of Black owned bookstores from like the 1830s to present day, talking about being watched by the FBI and I'm sure, racism and gentrification. Jax Freeman and the Phantom Shriek, which is a middle grade fantasy, and in Jax Freeman's family, I think his grandfather was a Pullman car porter, and so that's why he's surfing on a train. And then, as I already mentioned, Nature Swagger, and this is by Chronicle Books. It feels like something that the Mountaineers would do. That's a local organization, I want to say. That should be cool and fairly quick to get through. I think it's kind of a coffee table book. So I'm gonna go home. I'm just on my lunch break and make a sandwich and get back to work. Quick sitting down update because my cramps are bad today. Also, I remembered to use my mic. Yay me. I finished A Short History of Blackcraft. It was indeed short, and I'm gonna rate it 3 stars. I think that this is a combination of I wish that the book would have gone into more depth on certain things, but then also There are just some topics that are super interesting, but we don't have a lot of information about them, certain people or crafts, because a lot of the crafts in this book were made by enslaved people that we just don't have records for, especially not records in their own words. There were some things that I already knew about, so it was cool to read more about them, like the quilts of G's Bend and the face jugs that definitely reminded me of this Charmaine Wilkerson book. I forget the name of it now, but I'm holding it up. That I think was definitely inspired by the particular artist who wrote poems on his pottery. I'll find his name for you. This was Dave the Potter from Edgefield. Another thing is, I wish that there had been more photographs in this book. There were drawings, there was art, but some of the objects mentioned did not get photographs. I just thought that was kind of an interesting choice for a book that was about these objects. But all in all, I think this is probably a good jumping off point to doing more research, like, I'll hold it up here, The History of the Harlem Renaissance by George M. Johnson, which also has quite short biographies and sections. And then the next book I've already started, it's over there, I'm not gonna go get it, is Jax Freeman and the Phantom Shriek by Kwame Mbalia. And Mbalia got his start writing books for the Rick Riordan Presents line, and so that voice is very much present here. It's a little much so far, like I'm not the target audience for this anymore, but I do love middle grade, and I do love a strong voice. I'm gonna keep reading and see how that one goes. I'm about to film my January wrap up, but I wanted to do a quick update and say that I got to the 50% mark, but I'm unfortunately going to DNF Jax Freeman. The tone is just too quippy for me. There are all these asides within the narration, which some of them are like quite fun and funny, but I think it's getting like just a little bit exhausting, honestly. And also Jax just like keeps refusing the call. He keeps seeing things and going, nope, I'm out of here. And it's happening over and over again. And the book overall is just a little bit repetitive. And we also, even at the 50% mark, don't have a lot of information yet. Like, not a lot has been explained to Jax and therefore to the reader. And so that's just frustrating. And I have other books that I want to be reading instead of trying to push through this to ultimately give it a middling star rating. So finishing that, and probably honestly going to start on the Starseekers next because I'm looking forward to that one. Yesterday I started and finished the audiobook for Unbound by Anne E. Berg. This is a book in verse, and I listened to it on audio, which was read by Bonnie Turpin. I think that's how I found it, because I occasionally scroll through books read by Bonnie Turpin on Libby to see if I've missed any. And I thought this was so good. I rated it, I think 4.25 or 4.5 stars on the Storygraph. I'll have to double check. This is a book set in the 1860s on a plantation. The main character, Grace, is 9. This is a middle grade book, and she has been living with her family who are enslaved on this plantation. They work in the fields. It's never actually stated, but implied that her dad is the plantation owner. She's very light-skinned. Kind of at the start of the book, they want her to move up to the big house to start working there. And the plantation owners are horrible. The wife is just a nasty bitch. And Grace talks back to her, as I feel most would in that situation, where she has a very strong sense of justice and right and wrong. She calls it her sense of rightiness. And that leads to the plantation owners wanting to sell her mom and her younger brothers, and so all of them run away, and they're living in Virginia on the edge of the Great Dismal Swamp. And this is actually not the only middle grade book that I've read about the Great Dismal Swamp. Let me see if I can find it here. Free Water by Amanda Lookman Dawson is also about enslaved people escaping to live in the Great Dismal Swamp. I can't remember if it's called that because it is a dismal place, or at least the white settlers thought it was dismal, or if it has a different meaning. And parts of that swamp have been like drained and cut back and built on, which is a bad idea because the water table is still like higher than normal and houses built there have issues, but a lot of the Great Dismal Swamp is still in existence today, and in the 1700s and 1800s, enslaved people would make their homes inside of it, and they were known as maroons. So this book is in conversation with that history, and I thought it was so good, and I think it really was a good reminder of just how horrible slavery was as an institution, and how awful plantation owners were, and really just like how soon this all was. I mean, the Civil War only happened like 4 or 5 generations ago, and people were owned and whipped and killed and sold away from their family, and so much of that ingrained institutional racism still exists today as a result of the institution of slavery going on for so many years. I have a friend who's a 5th grade teacher, and next time I see him, I'm going to recommend this book. I think it would be really good for any middle grade reader. As happens when listening to a book in verse on audio, it doesn't really read like poetry. Some books in verse do, but this one just kind of sounded like a short book. Not to say there weren't some like poetic turns of phrases, but it just reads like a story. And Bonnie Turpin did a wonderful job, as always. I also wanted to give you an update on Starseekers. I'm really enjoying this. As with the improvisers, there's too many characters and subplots, and the magic systems are not really well explained, and they're also too powerful. The main character is good at a lot of things and is like never wrong, but I'm still having a good time. Like, I still enjoyed the improvisers, and since I listened to the improvisers on audio, I'm not sure that was present in that book, although it probably was. I'm just noticing some kind of weird punctuation errors. I wouldn't even call them errors, it's just more like the sentences aren't phrased and punctuation isn't used how I would necessarily use it. I mean, there are some sentences that are questions that don't end in a question mark, and then there are a lot of sentences that could use with a comma that don't have one. Like, for example, in the phrase, "Oh, you think you're so smart, don't you?" Like, there's a natural pause in smart and don't you, but in this book, a lot of the time, the author just runs straight through, and so in my mind, when I'm reading it, it reads as, "You think you're so smart, don't you?" rather than having that natural pause that would come about for a comma. But the love interest here, Theo, I think is a vast improvement on Dylan. He's not hounding his love interest for most of the book from the improvisers, and I'm enjoying the kind of like 1960s slice of life stuff. I've read a lot of books set in the 60s this year, actually, like To the Moon and Back. The Johnson Forest starts in the 60s, and then this one is probably another one. But I'm finding it to be kind of like cozy almost, like they're spending a lot of time in universities and an old house, like little small businesses, and I'm enjoying that aspect of it. The plot is kind of hard to explain because there's so many subplots and they all feed back into the main plot, which is a pet peeve of mine. Sometimes a subplot can just be unrelated to the main mystery. If everything is related, I think it makes the world feel kind of small. Our main character, Dr. Cynthia Rhodes, works at NASA as a calculator, and she's really, really good at it, of course, and everyone's jealous of her. Sorry, I should stop. Some of the subplots going on there are these vases that have been found in shipwrecks that have a component they can use in rocket fuel, so they're working on that. She is dating this archaeologist named Theo Danner, who's also looking into these vases. She has 2 younger siblings that she's kind of raising as her wards, and I'm sure that this is going to feed into it, but she was raised by her grandparents, and they were attacked a few years before the book starts, and had amnesia, and they've gotten some of their memories back, but not their memories of her, but they remember her siblings, and so it's really hard for her to have a relationship with them because they don't remember raising her. And it's funny because we got it a few chapters in until that was mentioned, like, offhand, and I'm like, wow, that would be the first thing I would bring up about this character personally. But there are some very humorous parts where she's raising these two teenagers who are in high school and starting to figure themselves out and rebel. I'm about 120 pages from the end, so I'll probably finish this today and then get back to you with more thoughts when I'm done. I finished The Starseekers by Nicole Glover a few days ago, and despite my problems with some of the punctuation and there are some misspellings or like homophones that get used incorrectly, I still thought it was really fun. Like, it's kind of a cozy globe-trotting adventure. Well, they go to a few other states and then the Caribbean, but I still thought it was just a lot of fun. I think that my critiques of it still stand, and they stand from the previous book, The Improvisers. There's too many characters, there's too many magic systems, and I just kind of let the plot wash over me. There were one or two points where I was like, oh, I think I know what's going on with the mystery here, but I think there are way too many elements for the reader to actually be able to like follow and figure out the mystery first. But I'm not a mystery reader, so it might be more obvious to people who are more experienced with the genre. I'll continue to read Nicole Glover's books. Also, this reminded me so much of The Calculating Stars by Mary Robinette Kowal that I read last year, and I'm continuing to read that series. But I noticed a lot of similarities, and I wonder if she was inspired at all. And also, there's a call for astronauts at the end of this book, and main character Cynthia thinks that she might be a good candidate. So if there's like a future book with her as an astronaut or her descendants as an astronaut, I think that'd be super fun, and I would read it, and I gave this 3.5 stars. I've started the audiobook for A Love Song for Ricki Wilde by Tia Williams. This is one of my 26 books to read in 2026, so I'm glad that I'm working on that list. I liked 7 Days in June, and I'm liking this one. I have some theories about what's going on with the male main character that I'm not gonna share, but I think there's like maybe a supernatural element to this book, or at least the author is trying to lead me in that direction, then she might take a hard turn, I don't know. There are some flashbacks to the Harlem Renaissance in this book that I find super interesting. The funny thing is that I found when I'm reading contemporary, I don't like dislike reading it, but if they mention at all any historical elements or a sci-fi book that the main character is reading, I instantly wish that I was reading speculative or historical fiction instead. I just like those genres more, and so as soon as I got a little tiny taste of historical fiction, I'm like, oh, every time we go back to the present day, I feel a little bit cheated. Love Song for Ricki Wilde is about Ricki Wilde, who is in her late 20s, early 30s, and according to her family, she's kind of a fuck up. They are all moguls of this like national chain of funeral homes, and they're all rich and famous, and she is not cut out for the funeral home business. She wants to be a florist, so she moves up to Harlem and opens a flower shop, and then she keeps running into this guy named Ezra, who is extremely mysterious, and we're getting finally a few chapters from his point of view, but it's mainly been from Ricki's point of view. And the funny thing about Ricki is that she's very funny. Like, this is a pretty funny book, but I think she's kind of shallow, and she's clearly like never hung out with any nerds before, because every time she's at like a party or a social situation, she's like, oh, don't be awkward and bring up a historical or science fact, and then it's like the most banal science or historical fact that I already knew, and I'm like, you need to find a different crowd, Ricki, that like appreciates bringing up random facts, because that is certainly something that happens in my friend group. So I don't think that she's like as weird or quirky as the author is making her out to be personally. But it's been fun, and I'm really intrigued to see what happens with the male main character and if my theories are going to be proven correct. I started out with one theory, I'm now moving into another one, but I won't say what that theory is. And then I just started Mississippi Solo, A River Quest by Eddie L. Harris. This is a very much under the radar book, but it is about the author, a black man's quest to canoe the length of the Mississippi. And so far the writing's been really beautiful. There's some weird tense shifting where like one paragraph will be in past tense and then one paragraph will be in present, and he's still like in the same scene. But I think that his like writing and enthusiasm and descriptions of nature are really good, really well done. And I think that this is going to be both like travel writing and then also getting into like race, being a black man traveling in the South, and also maybe a little bit of history, which is why I picked it up for Black History Month. I had to order a used copy of this. I don't think it's in print anymore, and of the two libraries that I go to, only one system had it, which is why I ended up purchasing it. But I've been wanting to read this for a long time. I think it might be one of the oldest books on my TBR, so I'm glad that I'm finally breaking into it. It is a gorgeous day today, and I have finished 2 books. The first is the audiobook for A Love Song for Ricki, Wilde by T.L. Williams. I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. My theories were correct. I didn't expect both of them to be correct, but I combined both of my theories and there you go. And it was cute. I think they fell in love too fast, but they were like soulmates, so that kind of excuses it. And I think that the ending was very satisfying. It went where I expected it to, but in a satisfying way, where like I could kind of see things coming, but when it happened, it was like, as I predicted, not like, oh, that was predictable. I still think that Ricki as a character is a little bit shallow, and I wanted to see a little bit more of the Harlem Renaissance parts of it, but that wasn't the focus of the book, and I can get that elsewhere. I also finished Mississippi Solo by Eddie L. Harris. This reminded me a lot of books about through hiking, like hiking the Appalachian Trail or the Pacific Crest Trail, which I have attempted parts of the PCT and it didn't work out, but yeah, this very much reminded me of that, except for he's canoeing and has a lot of proximity to small towns and is meeting a lot of people. I think that the descriptions in the writing were beautiful. I really liked the characterization of the Mississippi as a person that exists kind of at all ages simultaneously, and so the narrator Eddie talks about how he is meeting the river as a child up in Lake Itasca, and then all the way down to New Orleans where the river's become an old man, and personifying the river and seeing kind of God in the river or the river as God. There were some interesting parts of it. I thought this was written in the 90s. It was actually written in 88, and there was a few parts where he kind of romanticized antebellum South and was like, sure, it was a shame they kept slaves, but anyway, aren't these plantation houses beautiful? In a way that I don't think would be written today. And also some kind of ideas about like, I'm doing this and this really makes me a man. They're just, interesting. There's also some kind of harrowing parts that I don't feel like he talked about enough. There's only one instance where he really runs into people that are very overtly racist and scary, and he does end up having to shoot at them, and then doesn't really talk about it after that. And there are people that he meets that like use the N-word, that have some racist ideas, but are also very kind and helpful to them, and he's really seeing the good in people and the things that connect us rather than divide us. But I'm not going to rate this one because it feels too close to a memoir to me, but I did enjoy it. I am only about 10 minutes into the audiobook for The Davenports by Crystal Marquise. I thought this one was set during the Gilded Age, so like 1890s, but it is set in 1910, and it is about, I believe, I'm not sure how many POVs it's going to have, but it's about 4 young women finding love. 2 of them are from this wealthy black family, and then 2 of them are one of them is their maid, and then one of them is their friend. But I'm not that far into it, so I don't have that much to say about it yet. But I'm sure I will have more to say when I finished it, and I will get back to you with that. I remember my microphone. Aren't you proud of me? I finished Nature Swagger a few days ago. I just haven't had the chance to film an update. And I liked it. I'm not going to give it a rating because it's just a bunch of people's experiences and photographs. But I think it was very inspirational. But it's a coffee table book. Like, there's not really many biographies or writing this longer than 3 pages. So it's very much like a jumping off point, and it has some great photos in it, but wasn't much more than that, I don't think. And it reminds me of other books that I've read before, like Been Outside, which has similar biographies from Black women and non-binary people in the outdoors. And I think that these kinds of books are great. I always want something more in depth, which is not what these books are for, so I can't really blame them for that. So that's that. I'm reading and really enjoying The Davenports by Crystal Marquise. It's so much fun, so enjoyable. I think that the way the author is juggling 4 storylines and romances is really impressive. I'm liking all the historical details. It's reminding me of like the joy I felt watching the first few seasons of Downton Abbey when I was a kid. I'll let you know when I finished The Davenports. I finished The Davenports by Crystal Marquise a few days ago. I was out of town with some friends this weekend and we were having a great time, and I just left my equipment at home. So this is my few days later update on finishing The Davenports. I really liked it. Like I said, it reminded me of Downton Abbey, and it gets into talking about class within the Black community and the opportunities that certain people have based on their wealth, and then also activism and different ways that people can be activists. And I gave it 3.75 stars. It did not end the way I expected, but it is a duology, and I will be reading the second one. I really want to see what happens and just how things go for everyone. I'm disappointed that all of the characters were straight. There's a kind of offhand mention that 2 of the maids of the Davenports are lesbians, but we don't really get to see that relationship very much. I think that Helen, who is the Davenport sister that loves being a mechanic and repairing cars, I think she would have been a great character to explore gender fluidity or sexuality. But I'm not going to spoil who she ends up with. Something under my bed just made a noise, but I think it was just stuff shifting around, hopefully. I've got the dog sitting on my feet, so hopefully she will protect me if anything happens. Unsettling. What was I saying? Anyway, I totally lost track of my thoughts. I think like a lot of YA, the prose didn't really stand out to me. It was just like a vessel for the story and the characters, but I thought all of the characters were really strong, and kind of the central conflict of all the characters is that they need to stand up for themselves, and that they need to stand up to their potential romantic partners, or especially their parents. And I won't spoil who, but there is this one character who was kind of the most mercenary and I won't go far as to say scheming, but along those lines, of all the characters. And by the end, she's the one who actually like grows a spine and says, I don't care what my parents say, I love you and I'm going to be with you no matter what. And I really applauded her. I thought that was such great character development, and they all have great character development, and they all have something that they need to work on or that they are trying to accomplish that's tied in with the relationship. And I just thought that the pacing and the way that everyone's storyline was handled was really well done. There was no character that felt like this is the main character and then everyone else is also there. I did think that the character who's a maid who wants to open a hair salon, Anne, it's not Anne Marie, but Anne something, or something Anne. It felt like she was in it less, but then I looked at the chapters in the audiobook in Libby, and she had an equal number of chapters as the rest of them, but maybe she like faded into the background a little bit more. It felt like her relationship was less like fraught or at the forefront, but her ambitions to own a salon were really important to her and were kind of the driving part of her story, whereas the relationships were driving the other characters forward more, which made sense because they were young society women trying to find a match. I haven't finished any other books since then to update you on, but I am reading Black Owned by Shar Adams. This is by a journalist for, I believe Shar Adams works for CNN, NBC. And so it reads like journalism, but this is a history of Black-owned bookstores starting in the 1830s, specifically Black-owned bookstores in America, and going through the ways that Black militant and liberatory movements found their place and their home at these bookstores. And some of these bookstores did well, some just lasted for a few years, but they all have their own story to tell. So I'm about a third of the way through that. And then I'm around 60% of the way through These Heathens by Mia Mackenzie. I believe I may have mentioned this book like at the beginning of the video is one that I might get to. This was recommended by Kayla from Books and Lala, and I'm loving it. It's so well written, and it is, I think it might be a 5-star, honestly. Like, I'll see what happens by the end, but it's just incredible. It reads like kind of a modern classic. So this is about a young woman from rural Georgia who finds herself pregnant. She's only 17. She loved school, especially her English class, but she had to drop out at 15. Yeah, at 15 to go take care of her mom, who's sick. She has 2 younger brothers and her dad works, but they just kind of expect her to do all this unpaid labor for them, basically, and there's no plan in sight for her to return to school. But when she realizes that she's pregnant, she goes back to her high school to an adult that she trusts, which was her English teacher, Mrs. Lucas. And Mrs. Lucas agrees to help her, which involves taking her to Atlanta to a friend with a complicated relationship of Mrs. Lucas's, who says that she will pay for Doris, the main character's abortion. And so we're following just kind of like one weekend, and it's a quite short book, but I think that it's so economical with its word count, where some things aren't described. It's just like they skip over the train ride to Atlanta entirely, but nothing important happened on it, and so we just skip from town to Atlanta, and that's what needed to happen. It's totally fine. It didn't waste pages on that. The way that the character is written and the consciousness raising and character development that she's undergoing is so fascinating, and you're rooting for her so much. But she's very religious, and she's raised in this pretty, like, very small town. It's 3,500 people. It's funny because she has kind of 2 minds, where one is she'll see something and go, oh, that's sinful, and she can kind of like, she intellectually thinks that, but emotionally doesn't necessarily agree with that, and in the beginning of the novel isn't even necessarily acknowledging to herself that she doesn't agree with that thought. But all the things that she sees over the course of this weekend are changing her mind and making her realize that she can ask for more in her life. We're also seeing a lot of important figures and historical like movements and events of the 60s. So she goes to a SNCC meeting and meets Coretta Scott King, and it mentions at the beginning that she's going to meet Martin Luther King Jr. at some point, which hasn't happened yet. But yeah, it's so well done. I'm enjoying it so much, and it's books like these that really remind me like why I love reading. Honestly, like, it doesn't feel like a chore to put the audiobook on. I want to be listening to it, and I'll get back to you, but I really am hoping that it's like a high 4 to a 5. So I finished 2 of my books that I was reading today that I've already updated you on. Black Owned by Shar Adams, which kind of continued to be what I expected from the first third or so, like very journalistic voice, tracking the history of Black booksellers, and the section that I was reading was particularly the 90s through the 2020s, and it got into the outpouring of support for Black-owned bookstores in the wake of George Floyd's murder, and then all of that dropping off a few months later, and talking about the need for these bookstores to still be supported, but even after this renewed interest and after the interest of white people wanes, still needing for these bookstores to exist and turn a profit and find ways to be important pillars of the community. And then talks a little bit about bookstores that have opened post 2020. And I like that in the back of the book there was a list of Black-owned bookstores by state, and listed a few in Washington that I already knew about, but it's a good reminder to go and visit those, and then some in Oregon close by that I didn't know about that I would love to go visit. So I rated that 3.5 stars. And then I also finished These Heathens by Mia Mackenzie. It wasn't the 5-star exactly, but it was a solid 4.5. I loved it. It's such a good look at all of these events and all of these relationships, particularly queer relationships, through the eyes of this teenager who, it's ambiguous at the end. Like, I think that she is straight, but there are these really, really important lesbian characters, and lots of important luminaries of the time have cameos, or in the case of Coretta Scott King, a pretty large role. But there's a Martin Luther King cameo, there was a Bayard Rustin cameo that was great, where the woman that is hosting Doris and her teacher in Atlanta is hosting a like queer party, which Bayard Rustin is at, and Doris gets to see all of these people like dancing together. It was such a beautiful moment of queer joy, so I really, really loved that chapter. And it didn't have the like amazing happy ending that I wanted because I'm a sap, but it did have an ultimately satisfying ending, and though it's not stated outright, you do learn that things go well for Doris, just not like immediately well at the end of the weekend as I was hoping for. But again, I want all books to end in a nice, tidy, happy bow. And then I started today The Great Mann by, I'm looking around as if that will help somebody. You'll be able to see the cover on the screen, which is a Black 1940s Great Gatsby retelling. So the main character, Charlie, has just been discharged from the army. It's 1945, and he goes to visit his cousin who lives in LA, and turns out that she lives in this very affluent Black community. And we're also getting another book with lots of cameos of historical figures. You have all of the usual beats of a Great Gatsby story. This is now the third Great Gatsby retelling that I've read, where Charlie is Nick, and then this character, James Mann, is Great Gatsby, and then there's the Jordan, Daisy, Myrtle, Tom, all of those characters with the names changed. Then also Hattie McDaniels and Louise Beavers are also here, and he goes to a party where there are like multiple movie stars, and like Duke Ellington is playing. Also the second book that I've read this year with a Duke Ellington cameo. He also is in Love Song for Ricki Wilde. And I'm about halfway through that, and I'm really liking that. I think that it has a lot of the like uncomfortable social situations that Great Gatsby does, which is sometimes hard for me to read. That's just like a personal thing. But I think that the way that the story is transposed into the 1940s, and it's post-war, but post a different war, and you're seeing the glitz and glamour of that post-war life, but it's in a different era and with different people. And the author actually says in the beginning that they were inspired by these Black characters that have a very small cameo in The Great Gatsby. They're being driven by a white driver, and that really intrigued the author. And so they set out to write this book. I'm using they pronouns because I can't remember the author's name, so I actually don't know their gender. I'm hoping to finish that soon because I'm enjoying it, and it's very readable. It has a lot of like quick sentences, but also some very good like poetic language. So I'll let you know when I'm finished. Finished 2 books since I last updated you, so sorry about that. It's been a little bit busy here in this house. So the 2 books that I finished were really, really good. So I finished The Great Mann by Kyra Davis Lumry, and I I can't remember now what rating I gave it. I want to say 4.25 on the story graph. That feels right. Yeah, it's just so well done, really well written, just so many wonderful turns of phrase and just like memorable passages. And also, I thought that it was done so well as a retelling, where sometimes I feel like with retellings, characters need to act a certain way in order to get to the shape of the original story. And here, not only did everything that transpired, which was events from the original The Great Gatsby, make sense, it deepened the characters from the original and just like changed them enough, but also made all of their actions like perfectly tragically lead up to the ending of The Great Gatsby. And there's also a like community triumph that happens that's juxtaposed with this personal tragedy from Charlie, the main character, that like you know is coming. But I thought that the like dramatic irony of that and this thing that happens, sorry if you can hear the dog choking next door, she's fine. Main character Charlie, who's our Nick stand-in, is haunted by racialized violence that he witnessed both as a child and post-war, coming back to Virginia. When he gets to LA and to this affluent Black community, he's really surprised by the way that people act and how they don't bow and scrape to the white people around them, and they don't flinch away from offending white people. And there are several times early in the book when he sort of expects violence or a certain treatment from white people, but they are, as these affluent Black people, protected by their wealth. And so he starts to be changed by witnessing that around him and feeling like he doesn't have to be afraid anymore. In The Great Gatsby, I haven't read it for a long time, but my recollection of it is that Nick is a pretty passive observer, and the main character is Jay Gatsby, which is a very common, like, classic literature trope of having the narrator be just kind of the voice of an observer talking about the main character. I mean, you see this in most Sherlock Holmes books and short stories. Watson is present, but not really doing a lot. He's just like telling us what he's seeing Sherlock Holmes do. But Charlie is a very active character. He's very clearly the main character in this, and he is so stitched into the lives of the people around him. I can't recall, but I feel like his relationship with Daisy, is his cousin, is not like a super big deal in the book. It's just like a way for him to be in this area. But here, his relationship with his cousin Marguerite, aka Margie, is very important. And we see her kind of like willingness to be unaware of the things around her and like actively feigning ignorance and pretending that things are a lot better than they are. And she is just kind of seeking safety in whatever way she can and with whichever man she can. And then Anna, Charlie's girlfriend, who's the Jordan stand-in, is a really strong character. And although there is the discussion in the book that Charlie really cares for James, I don't think that there was intentional like homoerotic subtext. He just kind of sees him as like a close friend. That's the way that I read it personally, and he definitely has a like romantic sexual relationship with Anna. And Anna is a reporter, and she is boarding in the same house that Charlie is, which is Louise Beaver's, the actress's house. I hadn't heard of her before this book actually, but she was a actress working in Hollywood in the 30s and 40s, and there's a few actually like lost films of hers that have since been found that had predominantly Black cast, or there's at least one of these that I'm aware of, which is so cool. Ever since reading The Invention of Hugo Cabret, I've been really fascinated by lost media, and unfortunately this like Black actress's work was lost, and I think a lot of Anna May Wong's films were lost as well. And then another book that I finished today while they were working on my car at the auto shop is How the Word is Passed by Clint Smith. This is one of my 26 books to read in 2026, and it is the book that I wanted to read this month, that I was like, if I don't read any other book this month, it has to be this one. And it's an obvious 5 stars for me. It's so important, so incredible, and I've read a few other works similar to this. I've read 400 Souls of the 1619 Project, and this is written by a poet, so it's just so beautifully written. I underlined so many things, which I don't normally do with physical media. I just flipped to a random page here. I did actually really like this one. This is one of my favorite quotes from the book. Lineage is a strand of smoke making its way into the sky, even though we can't always tell where it's coming from, even though sometimes we can't distinguish the smoke from the sky itself. So in this book, Clint Smith goes to several different locations that are relevant to the history of African Americans and slavery and the Civil War. There's a extremely uncomfortable, intense chapter where he goes to a Sons of the Confederacy meeting, and the whole time I was just clenched up, waiting for something bad to happen to him. I really liked the way that he interviewed the people who were experiencing certain tours or monuments around him to get their perspective, mainly white people, and kind of their ignorance about the horrors of slavery. Another really harrowing chapter is when he goes to Angola, which is a prison in, I think, Louisiana, and it's just very voyeuristic, and the way that the prison history is talked about glosses over a lot of the horrors of the prison, and then the way that the prison is talked about in a modern day, it's still a plantation, and the people incarcerated there working in the fields, literally picking cotton, are paid 7 cents an hour because labor laws don't apply to prisoners. And he's with a man who was formerly incarcerated there and comes back about once a month to visit people and raise awareness. And that guy gives him a good perspective on what life is like inside, and both the author and this gentleman draw a direct line between slavery and incarceration, particularly the incarceration of Black and brown men. I think this is an extremely important text for pretty much everyone around the world, not just Americans, but if your country was at all touched by the Middle Passage and the triangle between the Americas, England, and West Africa, please read this book. It's gorgeous, it's so important, it is gonna challenge you, it's gonna teach you. Yeah, I think it's absolutely required reading. The last book that I'm planning on reading for this vlog, and then I'm gonna call it good, is Miracle at St. Anna by James McBride. This is a nonfiction story about a Black battalion in World War II stationed in Italy. And I mentioned at the start of this video that I think this book is maybe out of print. At least I couldn't find it in my local library, which is super rare, so I bought this copy. Oh, I almost forgot actually. I don't think I'll read it for this vlog because I have a lot of other library holds to get through, but my hold for Keeper of Lost Children by Sadeka Johnson did come in, so I need to go and pick that up, and that'll be another World War II book. But I'll get back to you once I finish Miracle at St. Anna, and that will be the end of the vlog. Wrapping this video up with the last book that I read, Miracle at St. Anna by James McBride. And I waffled between a 3 and a 2.75. I think I'm gonna go with a 2.75. I don't think that this book is necessarily bad. I think that the right reader would really enjoy it and get a lot out of it, but I just didn't enjoy it. So this is following 4 soldiers from an all-Black battalion in World War II, and they're in Italy, where a lot of really brutal fighting is happening. And one of them, this big guy named Sam Train, crosses this canal and finds this kid who's been injured, and sort of through a series of events, 3 of his squad mates follow him, and then they find themselves way the heck up in the mountains away from the rest of the US Army in this teeny tiny mountain town of Italians. And that's like what the book is named after. and kind of what is on the back of the book, but they don't actually get to the town until 25% of the way through. And so I thought that the pacing was kind of weird because of that. And then also the climax of the book is like a single chapter. But at the same time, it was very cinematic. Like I could really see why it was adapted. It's written in, like, you could see the movie playing out in your mind. Something that made it kind of like frantic or a bit fragmented to read was that it did a lot of head hopping and hopped around in characters' perspectives all in the same scene, and so it wouldn't happen in the same paragraph, but certainly while there were like 5 people in a room, it would jump between their perspectives. So you could never quite like just sink into someone's perspective because it would just zap you over to someone else. And I described it before as brutal, and it is a very brutal book. Like, it's showing the brutality of war, and it's not trying to glamorize it. I mean, it makes war horrifying and sad and disgusting, and that's good. I just didn't really enjoy reading that. And it's also very, like, has the male gaze, where all the main characters, I mean, they haven't been with women very much as they've been in the army for the last 2 years. They're very horny, and just the way that women are talked about is nearly always from a male perspective, and not just women are put under the male gaze, like the entire world is kind of put under the male gaze, which was just, I think, like, very accurate, but just like a little bit off-putting to read, and I think kind of fit into the brutality of the war and the like hopelessness that these characters felt from what they were going through. I watched the trailer and it makes the like movie look very epic. I mean, it kind of reminded me of Saving Private Ryan a little bit, which I have seen. This book doesn't feel necessarily epic. It just feels like sad and muddy. Like, not muddied, but like literally you're wading around in the mud for a lot of it. And so there's nothing glamorous about it, just as there's nothing glamorous about war. So I do applaud James McBride for portraying that. And that concludes my Black History Month video. Of course, every month is Black History Month, and as N.K. Jemisin asked, how long till Black Future Month? So I'm gonna continue to read books by Black authors and Black history books throughout the year. Just won't be focusing on them in an entire video like this. And I was really trying to read like Black historical fiction, so now I have some like Black nature writing and contemporary fantasy that I'm going to get to. Thank you very much for watching if you've gotten this far, and please remember to like and subscribe. Next week will be my February wrap-up, and then after that I might be taking a week off. I'm not quite sure. Again, thank you, and I will see you next week.